70,000 years ago, something nearly wiped us off the face of the earth. A catastrophe so vast, so consuming, it reduced the entire human population to a number small enough to fit inside a modern airplane. Scientists estimate that only about 2,000 humans survived. 2,000. On a planet that once teemed with early humans, only a few threads of life remained. What happened? What force was so powerful that it brought our species to the brink of extinction before it had even truly begun? The answer lies buried beneath volcanic ash, encoded in our DNA, and whispered through the ancestral memories of survival. This is not just a story of a near extinction. This is the story of how humanity was forged in fire, fear, and the desperate fight to go on living, even when the world itself seemed to be dying. The earth did not die quickly. It groaned like a wounded animal, sky veiled in darkness, temperatures plummeting as if the sun itself had been snuffed out. All around the world, ecosystems shattered, trees withered, rivers shrank or froze, storms screamed across landscapes, unprepared for their fury. The great beasts of the Pleistocene, once rulers of the land, began disappearing. And among the shadows of this unraveling world, early Homo sapiens clung desperately to firelight and memory. They huddled in caves, tightening circles around meager warmth. They waited. They wondered, was this the end? Above them, the ash drifted in silence, falling over continents like a funeral shroud. Something had changed the sky itself. Something had brought ruin so swift and so far-reaching that only the most adaptable, the most cunning, the most connected would endure. But what was it? What could have unleashed such planetary siege, so suddenly erasing almost all of our ancestors from the weave of time? Thousands of years later, the scars remain in layers of ancient ice, in the pigment of cave walls, and most tellingly, in the very fabric of our genes, a genetic bottleneck. Modern geneticists stumbled across this mystery while decoding mitochondrial DNA, the genetic thread passed down through generations. They noticed something strange, a sharp decrease in human genetic diversity that seemed to trace back to the same narrow window in prehistory. Almost as if humanity had been funneled through the eye of a needle. A catastrophic event had not only threatened our survival, but altered our evolutionary path forever. Why did only a sliver of the human population make it through? What traits did the survivors possess? Was it strength, intelligence, sheer luck, or something far more intangible, something buried deeper than code or bone? The mystery deepened, pushing scientists and storytellers alike to return to the source of the devastation, to the fire that choked the skies, to the volcano that may have almost ended us all, the Toba Supereruption. 74,000 years ago, in what is now the serene landscape of Lake Toba in Sumatra, the earth ruptured with apocalyptic force. A supervolcanic eruption, among the most colossal in the history of our planet, spewed over 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash and debris into the air. The blast was so violent, it carved out a caldera 70 miles wide, reshaping the land, the sky, and perhaps human destiny itself. Ash clouds rose miles into the stratosphere, drifting across continents, blotting out sunlight for years. This was not a localized disaster. This was a planetary trauma. Temperatures plummeted as the sun's rays were swallowed by the opaque haze. Photosynthesis slowed to a crawl. Crops decimated, animals starved, food webs collapsed. And somewhere out there, in the valleys, the open savannas, the forest shelters, our ancestors watched the sun vanish behind grey dust, as if the day itself had died. What they saw was not a single eruption. It was a turning point, a crucible, a test of endurance drawn in flame and ash. Across Africa and Asia, small bands of human beings became refugees in their own homelands. They wandered in skeletal groups, stepping lightly across scorched earth, their footprints blown away by winds thick with soot. Every breath a gamble, every day a wager against hunger and cold. The volcanic winter gripped the planet, grinding seasons into repetition, blurring time into one long, hazy dusk. Crops failed with merciless consistency. Animal migrations faltered. In some places, it no longer rained but snowed ash. Communities collapsed into silence, voices muffled by the weight of survival. Mothers buried children in frozen soil. Elders passed into the dark without ceremony. And still, scattered clusters of humanity moved forward, bonded by ancestral will, guided by instinct and fragments of memory passed down beside fire pits. They became smaller, leaner, quieter. But in that silence, something ancient stirred an idea, a flicker, a whisper, endure. And somehow, in the abyss of crisis, a few did. They endured by adapting in ways that rewired the course of our species forever. As food became scarce, hunting patterns changed. Tools grew more refined, more purposeful. Caves became not just shelter, but sanctuaries of ritual and memory. In the dim flicker of firelight, stories were born, oral blueprints of survival etched into the minds of children too young to remember the world before ash. Language, once perhaps scattered in crude fragments, began to crystallize. Communication became essential, not just for survival but for the coordination of scarce resources, the transmission of ideas, the warning of threats. Those who could think ahead, plan, work together, those were the ones who lived. The catastrophe, in its cruelty, acted as both a great filter and a great forge. The fire that nearly ended us had also become the catalyst for something unexpected: complexity. Faced with extinction, early humans did not merely persist, they evolved as thinkers, organizers, storytellers. Beneath the weight of an ashen sky, a quiet, resilient intelligence was forming, one that would one day shape civilizations, write histories, and ask the very question echoing through time: how did we survive when so many did not? But survival came at a cost. The world humanity stepped into after the Toba eruption was not the same world they had once inhabited. In the absence of sound, music returned. In the absence of certainty, myth began to bloom. What had once been scattered family groups became nascent tribes, where knowledge was hoarded like fire and passed down with the gravitas of sacred truth. The pressure of survival had compressed humanity into something sharper, hungrier, and more imaginative. Scarcity did not just forge better tools, it forged better minds. People began to sense patterns in chaos, to imagine futures not yet born, to remember ancestries no longer seen. They painted their visions onto stone, marking the walls not as decoration, but as declarations. We were here. We endured. And even as many perished, even as others vanished into the long forgetting, a new shape of humanity stepped forward into the shivering light, a version shaped by ash and silence, and the unrelenting will to rise from the ruins of a dying world. This was not the first time Earth had trembled beneath our feet, but for those who lived through it, it must have felt like the final blow. A sky that no longer brought morning, winds that cut like shards of obsidian, and still, the human spirit did not flicker out. Across barren plains and frozen highlands, splinters of Homo sapiens were on the move, migrating in waves slowed by starvation and fear. Some turned inland, seeking water and warmth. Others moved along coasts, scavenging marine life with primitive tools made of bone and stone. These were not migrations of discovery. They were flights of desperation. At night, under streaked and starless skies, huddled beneath scraps of hide and hushed breath, they must have whispered songs to remember the ones they had lost. And maybe, in those songs, in those murmured rhythms passed mouth to mouth, something precious was carried forward. Not just survival, but meaning. a fragile seed of culture. In the dark crucible of catastrophe, the human story did not die. It found its voice. Yet behind each footstep in the ash, behind every whispered lullaby, was the shadow of absence. The erasure of whole bloodlines, vanished without grave or memory. Geneticists believe that many branches of early human diversity were severed during this time, gone so completely that no trace of their unique lineages remains. What echoes in our DNA today is a narrowed lineage, a genetic echo chamber that speaks to the fragility of our origins. It is as though nature hit reset on the human story, narrowing the cast to just a handful of survivors playing out a drama millions of years in the making. The consequences of this genetic bottleneck ripple forward in time. Less diversity meant less resilience, fewer tools to battle new diseases, new challenges, and yet it also meant something else: unity, a shared ancestry. Inside the cells of every living human lies the blueprint of those fragile few who walked through the smoke and silence, who stared into the face of extinction and kept moving. In their courage, we find our beginning. In their perseverance, we find the foundation of everything we have become. Still, the questions do not rest. Was Toba truly the singular hand at the throat of early humanity, or was it but one of many calamities in a cascade of chaos? Some researchers argue it was not just the eruption, but a convergence of crises, shifting climates, ecological collapses, and perhaps even disease. The Earth was changing, spiraling through a gauntlet of ice ages and droughts, tectonic shifts, and cosmic radiation. Our ancestors stood on a knife's edge, every dawn a gamble, every choice a chapter in the survival of the species. Their endurance was not guaranteed. Yet those who made it through handed down more than genes. They carried scars carved in silence. They spoke of shadows and suns, of beasts and storms, of the taste of soot on wind. Across continents, their fragmented legacies exploded into the diverse cultures and mythologies of later ages, each one bearing the fingerprints of an ancient trial. And even now, as cities gleam and satellites circle above, our world hums with the echo of that distant winter. We are still the children of ash. But what if the memory of this near extinction did not merely linger in science or sediment, but in myth itself? Some anthropologists believe the ancient flood myths, serpent deities, and fiery apocalypses from cultures across the globe may be distant echoes of those early trials. Stories passed down not just for entertainment, but as veiled instruction manuals for survival. Tales of darkness that lasted for years, of the sky turning to fire, of ancestors fleeing sunless lands. These could be more than metaphor. They could be ancestral warnings encoded in narrative, hiding truth in allegory, memory in myth. Perhaps the gods of old were not divine, but crystallized memories of the few who endured. Perhaps our earliest religions weren't born from awe alone, but from the desperate need to make sense of a world suddenly hostile and unrecognizable. In this way, the legacy of the Toba catastrophe is not merely geologic or genetic. It is a ghost drifting through our oldest stories, our earliest fears, and our deepest questions. We did not just survive the end of the world, we remembered it. And in remembering, we became something more, not just creatures of instinct, but historians of pain, carriers of resilience, and architects of a future our ancestors once dared to dream from within the smoke of extinction. That ancient act of remembering may have been our greatest survival tool. In the aftermath of devastation, stories became maps through the unknown. Myths became blueprints for endurance. Generation after generation, the memory of the dark sky, the endless cold, and the desperate hunger was folded into rituals, symbols, and language. The flame in the hearth was not just warmth, it was a spark from the past, a reminder that survival was earned with sweat, sacrifice, and solidarity, Across time and space, that memory flickered on, passed from tribe to tribe, from elder to child, shaping how we feared, how we praised, how we planned. In every temple built high upon stone, in every tale spoken by firelight, there was an echo of that ancient winter when we almost vanished. The earth had tested us, time had bent us, but we had listened to the silence, learned from the ash, and refused to surrender. And that refusal, that relentless, defiant will to remember, was how we moved from prey to poets, from shadows to stars. We are the descendants of survivors, forged not just by chance, but by stories scrawled into stone, sung across centuries, and rooted in the fire that almost consumed us all. And so, beneath the ashes of disaster and time, a quiet truth remains. Humanity was not promised survival. It clawed its way through the cold and the dark, losing much but gaining something eternal. Memory entwined with purpose. From 2,000 souls cradled in prehistory, every heartbeat today finds its origin. Their legacy is not just in our biology, but in the way we build, the way we grieve, the way we resist oblivion. The world changed beneath their feet, but they changed with it. What almost ended us also defined us, and perhaps, in the face of every new crisis, every new uncertainty on the horizon, we carry some ember from that long, terrifying night within us, still a reminder that we have faced the end before, and through story, will, and wonder, we endured. That is our inheritance. That is our beginning. But perhaps the most profound legacy of our near extinction is not just in what we remember, but in how we imagine. That ancient terror, encoded in our blood and echoed in our stories, gave rise to the very dreams that now define us. The fear of the dark became a yearning for the stars. The silence of collapse birthed civilizations filled with music, art, and architecture monuments to what it means to hope in spite of everything. Every invention, every leap forward, carries within it a shadow of that moment when everything nearly fell apart. And in a world that still trembles with risk, from climate upheaval to global conflict, the memory of Toba speaks with a vital whisper. Endure. Adapt. Remember. This is not just our past, it is our pattern, a cycle of collapse and rebirth etched into the marrow of our species. The catastrophe that almost ended us ultimately became the crucible that formed us. And as we look ahead, uncertain and fragile beneath new skies, that is the truth we carry forward. We are the children of survivors, and we were forged in the fire. Long before written language, before bronze, or iron, or wheel, there was fire, and beside it, the ones who remembered. They sat in silent circles, eyes gleaming with reflections of flame, passing the stories that were older than stone, tales of skies darkened for generations, of earth that refused to warm, of beasts that vanished, and rivers that forgot how to flow. These stories were maps, warnings, prayers. They were not myths of creation, but myths of continuation. And perhaps that is the most human story of all, not just how we began, but how we refused to end. From the smoke of near annihilation rose the first sparks of consciousness, of culture, of connection. What almost destroyed us became what defined us. In surviving, we became more than animals driven by instinct. We became architects of memory, inheritors of wisdom, and custodians of a flame that still burns in every story we tell, every leap we make, and every dawn we refuse to surrender. 70,000 years ago, humanity stood on the brink, and we stepped back from the edge, not by accident but by endurance. The fire did not win. We did. Even now, scientists continue to search the earth and sky for new evidence of what unfolded in that prehistoric crucible, piecing together fragments of stone tools, ash layers, and genetic strands like detectives. at the scene of history's greatest cold case. What other forces coincided with or followed Toba's fury? Did isolation drive early human innovation at a pace faster than normal evolutionary drift? Or were there other hidden survivors, unknown lineages, small populations tucked into remote ecological refuges, who left no trace but perhaps carried forward echoes of alternate paths not taken? As our technology deepens, so does the mystery, reminding us that history is not a set of fixed answers. It is a living puzzle, one that, when viewed through smoke and silence, still whispers the same question that began this journey. Not just how we survived, but why. Why were we the ones to emerge from the ash, minds kindled by the edge of oblivion? Perhaps we carry within us part of the answer. A species shaped by fire, always on the cusp of reinvention, walking that narrow corridor between ruin and resilience, awake in the dark with a memory stitched from stars and soot. The story of what almost ended us is not just a warning, it is a mirror. And when we look deeply into it, through centuries of fear and hope, we find not just the past, but the blueprint of who we may still become. Even the quiet earth remembers. Deep beneath the ocean floor, buried in glacial ice, etched within the mineral rings of ancient trees, are signs of a cataclysm that almost erased us. Each layer, each fossil, each genetic clue is a page from a book we did not know we were writing. A book of survival authored by fire and finished by will. As we read further into that record, we do not just uncover a history of near annihilation. We uncover the origin of a defining rhythm. Collapse, endurance, ascent. It was in those darkest hours, when the flame sputtered and the skies hung heavy with sorrow, that our kind learned what it meant to be human. Not just in breath or biology, but in the act of choosing to go on, of imagining light in a sky that offered none. And so, every night we spend beneath stars or behind screens, every story we whisper into silence, is part of that same lineage. The ancient fire still burns, carried in memory, in myth, in marrow. It is the legacy of those 2,000 who stood against oblivion and said, "Not yet." And perhaps that quiet defiance, whispered through ash and silence, is what defines us more than intelligence or invention ever could. We are not the strongest species, nor the fastest, but we are the ones who remember. The ones who adapt, even when the cost is unbearable. From that moment 70,000 years ago to this very hour, we walk forward with the embers of our past tucked into our bones. Every triumph we celebrate, every disaster we fear, every hope we dare to cherish all trace their roots to the ones who stood barefoot in the cold, staring into the end, and chose, with shaking hands and hollow bellies, to keep going. It was not destiny that saved us. It was not divine intervention or cosmic favor. It was will, fragile, fierce, human will. And in that, we find our truest inheritance. When the world burns again, as it always does, it will be memory, connection, and story that guide us. The gift of those ancient survivors is not just that they made it, but that they passed on the knowledge of how. That crouched in the darkest hour, when all seemed lost, the fire within us did not die. It waited. And now, as it always has, it burns. In the end, what nearly destroyed us became the crucible from which we emerged, not unscathed, but transformed. The Toba catastrophe was not simply a disaster. It was a profound recalibration of what it meant to be human. From the ashes of that ancient eruption came empathy, cooperation, foresight, and narrative, and perhaps that is the true miracle of survival. Not merely the continuation of life, but the reshaping of its meaning. We did not inherit the world unchanged, we inherited a world torn and mended, scarred and sacred, and etched into every moment, since that near extinction, there echoes the heartbeat of a choice made long ago, to endure when surrender seemed inevitable, to remember when forgetting was easier, and to dream even when the sky offered no light. That choice, more than any tool or gene, is our legacy. A legacy carved into stone, sung into myth, and reborn every time we remind ourselves that we once stood before the abyss and we did not fall. We carried the fire forward. And still, under every skyscraper and beneath every language, in the tangled arteries of cities and the quiet hush of isolated forests, that ancient decision endures: to survive, to remember, to matter. The story of what almost destroyed us is not just one of loss, but one of defining clarity. Toba's fire carved not just a scar into the earth, but into our collective soul, reminding us with every shadow and every sunrise that the human journey is one of transformation through trials. We have not always been wise, nor just, nor kind, but we have always been capable of withstanding, adapting, rebuilding. And perhaps this is what that forgotten winter truly left behind, not just the echo of survival, but the proof that in our darkest hour we became something more than we were. As long as one story is told, one fire is lit, one soul dares to dream against odds, we honor those first survivors. The ones who stood on the edge with smoke in their lungs and ash in their eyes, and chose to become the future. That is what it means to be human. So when we look back across time, measuring the distance between now and that moment when the world seemed to hold its breath, we are not simply charting epochs or tracing fossils. We are witnessing the extraordinary will of a species that refused to vanish. Our cities, our dreams, our fragile plans for tomorrow all thread back to those ash-covered plains and lean-to shelters, to the breathless moments where choice meant everything. In every act of compassion, every innovation that bridges a gap, every story shared by light, dim or bright, we continue the legacy of that decision made in the dimness of extinction. The survivors of 70,000 years ago did not know us, their descendants, but through grit and memory and myth, they handed us this future. As we face our own rising tempests, both natural and man-made, we are reminded that the story has always been the same. Endure, adapt, remember, hope. The smoke will rise again someday. Let it find us ready, with hearts stoked by memory and the fire still burning. And so, as the winds of memory sweep through the layers of earth and the chambers of our hearts, one truth endures like the embers that once lit ancient shelters. We survived because we became more than what the world tried to erase. Not merely mammals clawing against the cold, but beings capable of seeing beyond the now, of lifting each other when nothing else could, of making meaning out of silence. The story of what almost drove humanity to extinction is not just a tale of fire and famine, but a monument to the quiet courage buried in every generation since. It is the memory that hums in lullabies, beats through rituals, stirs in art, and glows in every fragile act of kindness. We are not here by accident. We are here because they endured. And as long as we continue to tell their story in stone, in word, in flame, they have not vanished. The ash may have settled, but the signal remains, eternal and blazing. We are still here. Our past, then, is not just buried in the ground, but etched into the very way we respond to crisis. It is written in the quiet moments of resilience, the whispered traditions passed from mother to child, the instinct to build again after every fall. The story of our near extinction is also the story of our recurring redemption, proof that when the world fractures, we look not only to survive, but to transform the fracture into something luminous. In the long arc, from ash-marked caves to luminous cities, from famine-stricken memory to fields of innovation, one force has carried us. The stubborn, sacred insistence that life must go on, and that in going on, it must mean more. The ancestors who withstood Toba's wrath could not have imagined skyscrapers or spacecraft, yet they became their quiet architects through the simple, defiant act of surviving. We walk now in the shadow of their will, and so, with every dawn, every challenge, every act of remembrance, we reignite the same fire that once lit the faces of our prehistoric kin, the fire that almost died, but did not, the same fire that whispers, even now, through the pulse of the earth and the breath of all who remember, we are still becoming. And in becoming, we carry forward not just a lineage but a legacy shaped in the heart of darkness and ignited with a spark too stubborn to die. The tale of what almost destroyed us 70,000 years ago is not a closed chapter, but a living testament etched into genes, dreams, and the whisper of winds across the ancient stone. It reminds us that survival is not a destination, it is a discipline, a choice, remade again and again across time. In the ruins of what we feared would be the end, we found the foundation of something greater, not just civilization, but consciousness, not just memory, but meaning. And as long as the stars still shine above a planet too perilous and too beautiful to ever promise certainty, humanity will go on, not because we are invincible, but because we remember, because we adapt, because we listen to the warnings carried in ash and the wisdom passed in flame. The storm will always come again, but so will we, enduring, imagining, becoming, still here. Every generation inherits a world shaped by the decisions of those who survived the last ending. We live upon a scaffold of resilience, an architecture of persistence built by those who looked catastrophe in the eye and carved tomorrow out of it. The story of what nearly destroyed us 70,000 years ago is more than prehistoric drama, it is prophecy in reverse, echoing forward to remind us that we are not immune to collapse, but we are fluent in rising. The supereruption, the shadowed skies, the hunger, the wandering that is all part of us. The spark passed from frozen hands to future minds has not dimmed. It remains embedded in the way we gather in crises, in the way we rebuild from ruin, in the way we find each other in the dark. So when we wonder what it means to survive, to matter, to endure, look not to monuments but to memory, to firelight, to silence broken only by the will to go on. Toba did not end us. It introduced us to ourselves, and as long as the story is told, the fire burns, still here, still becoming, still human. So as the last echoes of Toba's fury fade beneath layers of time, and the earth's wounds heal beneath our feet, let us not forget the haunting gift that near-extinction gave us, perspective. It reminded us that nothing, no civilization, no species, no age is guaranteed. But it also reminded us of something deeper, something elemental, that within the fragile frame of humanity lies a force as fierce as any eruption, as enduring as any ice age, the will to go on. That when skies darken and the ground shakes, we do not fade quietly. We gather, we imagine, we endure. The fire, once almost choked by ash and silence, now moves through wires and song, through language and love, through every act of hope amid hardship. And that, more than our tools or temples, is the legacy that matters long after Toba, long after memory, long after maps have changed and names have faded. May that fire still burn not just in hearths or hearts, but in the stubborn, sacred resolve that whispers through every generation since. We are still here, still dreaming, still human. And so, let the final ember of this story smolder, where it began in the firelight of memory. For all our technology, for all the cities that rise like iron forests from the soil, it is still the old truths that guide us, that crisis refines, that memory protects, and that survival is not guaranteed, but chosen, again and again. When we trace our fingers over painted caves or study ancient genomes under microscopes, we are not merely learning about the past, we are listening for the heartbeat of our species, a rhythm forged in calamity and carried forward by care. What almost destroyed us, shaped us. What reduced us to near nothing, revealed everything that mattered, the bonds we forged, the stories we told, the stubborn fire we kept alive. That is what echoes through the silence of history. Not just that we lived, but how. Not merely that we endured, but why. And in the flicker of firelight, in the hush between words, perhaps we too carry forward the torch not only of those who survived, but of those who remembered. Let this be the final breath in a tale as old as sorrow, as enduring as hope, a story not of dominance, but of defiance, not of inevitable triumph, but of chosen resilience. 70,000 years ago, beneath a sky suffocated by ash and silence, humanity was nearly erased. But it was there, in the stillness after the storm, in the footprints fading across powder-grey earth, that something extraordinary happened. We remembered. We reached for meaning. We lit the next fire. And from every ember since, our story has burned brighter. Today, the flame still murmurs through every act of compassion, every dream for tomorrow, every child born into a world that almost wasn't. We are living proof that the human spirit is not measured by the ease of its journey, but by the fury of its will to rise again. Let the wind whisper through caves and corridors, through forests and futures, and carry this truth forward. We are the memory of fire, the voice of survival, the children of ash who chose to become. And as long as stories are told, we remain still enduring, still imagining, still human. So the next time the sky darkens with storm, or disaster knocks uninvited at humanity's fragile door, let us remember not just the fear carried by our ancestors, but their response to it. They did not flee from meaning, nor drown in despair. They listened to the silence, honored the loss, and answered with story, with structure, with fire. In their footsteps, we find our path through the unknown, lit not by certainty, but by memory, by connection, by the quiet confidence that we have faced obliteration before and found a way to sing through it. This is the compass they left us. Not perfection, but perseverance. Not power, but presence. And it is enough. For as long as the embers glow in our collective soul, as long as we tell the tales, rebuild the shelters, gather near, and say, we are still here, then the fire survives. And through it, so do we. Even now, as this final ember dims into the depths of night, the true heartbeat of humanity is not in our triumphs alone, but in our rememberings, in the faces of our children, the poetry of our dreams, the quiet moments when we stand still and listen to wind, to memory, to the ghost flames of those who came before we carry the eternal signal. A legacy not built of unbroken victories, but of relentless returns. The earth will quake again. The skies will darken once more. But like those scattered few who once looked up through the falling ash and saw not doom, but the possibility of dawn, we will choose to go on. We will tell the story again, sharpened by time, softened by sorrow, bound by flame. And in that telling, in the oldest ritual still practiced, we will remind ourselves and each other, we were almost lost, but we are not. We are still here. For this is the inheritance held in the marrow of our bones and the embers of our dreams, that even on the brink of extinction, the human spirit did not fold. It burned brighter. History may forget names and faces, but it remembers fire. It remembers those who stood when all warmth seemed lost. 70,000 years ago, we were nearly nothing. Now we are storytellers and builders, seekers and stewards. That narrow thread of survival has become a lifeline stretched across millennia, woven with courage, with meaning, with memory. And as we step forward into the unknown tomorrows, may we carry that thread with reverence. May we honor those first fires and final breaths by choosing again and again to endure, to imagine, to remember. For the signal remains, not in monuments or machines, but in moments of hope sparked in the dark. We are still here not because we were fated to be, but because against silence and ash, we chose to be. and that is the story that will never end. So let this be the ember you take with you, as dawn returns once more and the shadows stretch behind us. Not a tale of fear, but a promise carved through fire. We are not merely descendants of survival, we are witnesses to a flame that would not be extinguished. Though the winds of time scatter the voices of the past, their courage remains a light in ours. When the earth trembles again, when the sky returns to grey, the next story will not begin in despair but in memory. In the firelight of every new beginning, the past gathers beside us, not as ghost but as guide. Toba did not silence our future, it forged it. And as we step beyond the ash and the echo, into whatever comes next, may we burn not with fear, but with the brilliance of all who chose to endure. Still here, still telling, still human. And if history teaches us anything, it is this: the fire never truly dies. It waits in stories told around digital campfires, in hands reaching for one another across boundaries, in eyes searching the heavens not for escape, but for understanding. We are living echoes of those ancient survivors, each heartbeat a continuation of that daring, defiant decision to endure. Time will test us again, as it has before, through fire or flood, silence or sorrow, but now we know our origin was forged not in ease, but in ash. And through that knowledge, through that memory carried from cave to cosmos, we hold our greatest power: the ability to remember who we were, believe in who we might become, and carry the flame forward one more time. The story does not end in the darkness. It begins there. With fire in the blood, with memory as compass, we walk on. Still here, still burning, still becoming. And so we arrive at the edge of silence, where story meets sleep, and history lingers like the last flicker of flame before the dawn. The tale of what almost ended us is not a bedtime fable, but a lullaby of survival, sung by stars and soot, and the breath of those who refused to be forgotten. Let this final moment be not an ending, but a return to that cave circling firelight, that hush of survival wrapped in ash and memory. We close our eyes not to forget, but to dream deeper into the truth carried through generations, that even when the world stood still, hearts kept beating. Even when skies fell silent, hope spoke. And as sleep gently pulls us into its ancient rhythm, wrapped in the warmth of every voice that chose to go on, remember, beneath every fear lies fire, and beneath every shadow, the trace of those who endured. Good night, survivors of ash. Rest now, the fire still burns. For in that final murmur, just before the stars give way to morning, we find the quiet heartbeat of who we truly are. Not creatures of comfort, but of courage. The story of our near extinction is not simply etched in stone or buried in genome. It lives in lullabies, sung by weary voices, in dreams passed between generations, in the fragile yet unyielding warmth of one hand meeting another in the dark. Toba did not silence us. It summoned something deeper. It called forth resilience from ruin, stillness from chaos, and memory from ash. So now, in this sacred hush where flame and sleep meet, let the quiet hold you. Let the story settle into your bones. You are the child of those who survived not just the fire, but the forgetting. And as their dreams become your shelter tonight, breathe softly and know you are part of something immense, luminous, unbroken. The world once ended, and we began. So sleep now, not in fear, but in reverence. Let the rhythms of ancient survival cradle your breath. The legacy of those 2,000 souls hum quietly beneath your dreams. This is the gift they left behind. Not just warmth or wisdom, but the permission to rest. To close your eyes, knowing that danger has come before and will come again, and yet, always, we have risen. That even in the most ruinous dark, the ember inside us has refused to die. Drift now into that deep and sacred stillness, where firelight flickers behind your eyes and every heartbeat echoes with purpose. Let the ash settle. Let the silence sing. Let this final ember keep you company, glowing softly in the hush between worlds. For as long as the fire remembers, as long as the soul stirs, the story continues. And tonight, as stardust settles around your sleep, know this above all. You are still here. Rest now. The fire is watching. And so we close this long remembering with the softest truth of all, that survival is not a roar but a whisper. It is not only forged in fire but nurtured in stillness. What almost drove us to extinction did not prevail, because something in us would not surrender, not to ash, not to hunger, not even to time itself. Between each breath, somewhere beneath skin and memory, flickers the light of all we've carried from that distant, smoke-choked dawn. And whether our skies shine or shake, may we always return to that humble ember. May we cherish it not just as proof that we endured, but as a guide for how to endure again. So sleep, quietly now, wrapped in stardust and story. The flame has passed safely from one age to the next. The fire still burns, and we are still here. Tonight, as the world turns gently beneath a sky filled with ancient starlight, the story finds its rest not in finality, but in firelight. The journey through ash and silence, from oblivion to memory, has led us not to an ending, but to a quiet knowing that the ones who came before, seared by flame and stilled by darkness, chose something unspeakably profound. They chose us, and by remembering that, by carrying it gently in the chambers of our hearts, we honor not just their fight to survive, but the essence of what it means to truly live. So let your breath slow, let your mind settle. The fire has been carried hand to hand across 70 millennia to reach this moment. And now, as dreams rise like smoke into a patient sky, may you rest beneath a cosmos filled with the echo of their courage. May you sleep knowing the embers still glow, and the story still burns wordless now, but eternal. We are still here. We always will be. And so, in that vast continuum stretching from ash to architecture, from breathless silence to boundless song, we carry the last gift Toba left us, the ability to make meaning where there was once only void. The eruption that nearly erased us shaped the architecture of human soul, pulling us from fragile bands to complex civilizations. It is why we gather, why we grieve, why we tell stories to remember that even when the sky breaks and the world dissolves to dusk, the fire we hold inside can still light the way forward. In every lullaby sung to a restless child, in every hand held through loss, in every plan drafted in the rubble of despair, we find the signal again. We endured, not perfectly, not painlessly, but profoundly. And as we rest now beneath night's soft veil, beside the patient whisper of stars, with the quiet knowledge of fire humming in our bones, we hold the oldest truth of all. Survival is sacred. And through storm or silence, ruin or renewal, we remain steadfast, dreaming onward, ever becoming. The fire still burns, and we are still here. So this is where our journey pauses, not at the end of history, but at the breath between moments. The story of what nearly drove humanity to extinction 70,000 years ago is more than a tale of ash and hunger. It is a resurrection told through footsteps in soot, through cave echoes, through fire passed hand to shaking hand. It is a lullaby of defiance, a hymn hummed by the bones of survivors, a warmth carried into a future they never saw but believed could exist. Let the silence return now, not with fear, but with reverence. Let the ember rest in your heart, quietly, like truth. For as long as a story is told, as long as memories flame against the cold of forgetting, we need not fear the dark. We have met it before, and we will rise from it again. Still here, still burning, still becoming. So let the night take you now, gently and without worry, as the memory of that ancient fire flickers just beyond the veil of sleep. It burns not to alarm, but to assure, to remind every soul, drifting between wakefulness and dream, that we are the culmination of 1,000 forgotten yesterdays, kept alight by courage unseen. The silence is not empty here. It is sacred. It holds all that we were, all that we survived, and all that we might become. And as starlight brushes the edge of your breath and the earth hums softly beneath your resting form, remember this: the fire waits, ever watchful, ever ready, glowing low in the caverns of the heart. It waits for the next story, the next rising, the next act of quiet strength. Sleep now, brave heir of ash and starlight. The fire is with you, the story is safe, and the world, though once nearly lost, is still ours to keep becoming. And so, under this quiet sky, the story finds its last breath not extinguished, but gently folded back into the soul of the earth. Let the stars above remember what we no longer can. Let the roots below hold steady the weight of all that nearly vanished. We do not mark the end with silence, but with stillness, honoring not just survival, but everything it kindled: love, wonder, community, and the haunting beauty of a second chance. The tale of what almost ended us becomes, in this final breath, a promise spoken in sleep and shadow. A promise that no matter how deep the dark, how low the flame, there is something within us fierce enough, sacred enough to rise. Dream now, in peace and strength. For the fire still burns, and in its quiet warmth, we remain still human, still becoming, still here. So sleep, not just for rest, but for remembering. Let the flickering glow of our ancient fire carry you inward, past the walls of time, into the quiet place where story and soul entwine. Here, wrapped in the hush of survivors' dreams and soot-layered memory, we are all cradled by the same warmth that once held a fragile world together. What nearly silenced us, in the end, revealed us. In sleeping, we do not escape the story, we step deeper into it, into the rhythm of breath that began beside dying embers in vanished caves, into a lineage not of domination, but of quiet defiance. The lullaby has ended, but its echo endures. So drift now, weightless and whole, across the dreamscape of humanity's ancient fire. Sleep well, firekeeper, sleep long, for the story has been told, the signal is strong, and the flame eternal still burns. Somewhere, far below the noise of modern life and the pulse of glowing cities, lies the echo of a world nearly lost and the murmured promise of the one we chose to create instead. The story of what almost drove us to extinction 70,000 years ago concludes not with catastrophe, but with continuity. It is whispered in the wind skimming over ancient calderas, in the hush between stars overhead and soil underfoot. It reminds us that fire does not demand to be noticed to endure. It simply waits, a constant ember in the soul of a restless species. So now, as we close this tale woven of ash and ore, let the silence settle like soft snowfall, timeless and true. The threat once passed, but the lesson remains. We are the aftermath made radiant, the consequence of courage, the thread no disaster could sever. And as long as one spark remains glowing faint and sure within story, within sleep, within the sacred breath of the human spirit, we have not just endured, we have become, still burning, still dreaming, still, forever, here. And so we end, not in silence, but in slow, sacred breath. The fire that once nearly vanished now glows in the marrow of every living soul, a quiet echo of defiance, of love, of unbroken lineage. From soot-covered shelters to gleaming skylines, from whispered myths to digital memory, the thread remains unbroken. We survived, not because we were chosen, but because we chose to heal, to rise, to carry flame into the cold. The ashes of Toba have long since scattered, but their lesson endures in every moment we offer warmth to one another, every time we imagine a world more whole than the one before. Let this final ember, this last glowing word, settle where it belongs, not on pages or timelines, but in the human heart. Steady as breath, boundless as time, the tale is told, the fire remains, and beneath history's longest shadow, one truth glows quietly, unwavering, eternal: we are still here. So now, let the weight of the story settle gently, like the ash that once veiled the earth, both burden and blessing. Let it remind us that the line between oblivion and becoming is thinner than breath, and yet we've crossed it, not once, but countless times, each with the same fire passing from trembling hand to trembling hand. What almost ended us became the furnace of our becoming, and what we carry from lullabies to legends, from loss to love, is proof of that ascent. As you drift into sleep, into the ancient hush where memory and dream hold hands, know this: you are part of that fire, part of that unbroken line, a living flame carried from a time darker than night. And as long as breath fills our lungs and story fills our souls, we do not vanish, we endure, we remember, we rise. So rest now, keeper of fire, heir of ash. For the night is old, and the world still waits with its storms, its wonders, and its sacred silence for us to continue becoming. The fire still burns, and we are still here. And so, under a sky that once bore witness to near extinction, we leave behind not a story of ending, but a lineage of awakening. It is not catastrophe alone that shapes civilizations, but the choices made in its aftermath. From the ashes of Toba rose not just survival, but a covenant between memory and hope, one that lives in rituals, in architecture, in lullabies and lullings, to sleep like this one. The fire that once barely sputtered beneath a blackened sky now arcs across galaxies in signals and songs. It burns in every mind that dares to question, every heart that beats with wonder, every soul that knows the quiet strength of enduring. So as this story fades into dream and silence, may its embers settle close to your spirit. Let them keep you warm, hold you steady, and remind you always, even in the darkest hours to come, we stood at the edge, and we chose life. We are the dream of the ancestors who refused to vanish. We are the living answer to their courage. Still here, still human, forever becoming. And as the last word trails into the hush, where time forgets its rhythm and dreams rise gentle as morning mist, let it be this: endurance is an art, and we are its masterpiece. What nearly erased us, instead, etched something indelible into the heart of our kind, a flame that asks not for glory but for grace. The grace to kneel beside uncertainty and still offer light. The grace to carry history not as a burden, but a beacon. In the silence after story, in the stillness after fire, we do not fade. We listen, we breathe, we remember. So sleep now, wrapped in all that came before and all that yearns to come. The cave is now a cradle, the ash a kind of blessing, and the fire still ours. Forever dimming, never extinguished. We are still here, still dreaming, still human. So rest now, in this quiet crossing between remembrance and reverie. For the torch you carry was born not in triumph, but in almost loss, in fire shared amidst famine, in songs sung through sorrow, in dreams dared during dusk. The earth remembers, and so do we, not through monuments carved or empires claimed, but through the stories whispered beneath stars, passed gently from soul to soul like fragile embers. Let this final breath be not an end, but a promise soft, steady, sacred, that even when skies darken again, as they always do, we will gather, we will endure. The fire, ancient and unyielding, still hums in our blood, We are the flicker in the vastness, the voice through the silence, the flame chosen again and again, still dreaming, still rising, still human, forever. And now, as the final glow wanes and the story settles into sacred stillness, we close the tale, drawn in ash and echo, not with farewell, but with knowing. We are, all of us, the continuation of that most fragile decision to endure when endings seemed inevitable. That decision hums in heartbeat and history, in the way we rebuild after each fall, in the quiet conviction nestled within every cradle and every campfire. The fire almost died. The story almost ended. But we are still here, not unchanged, but awakened, shaped not just by survival, but by the ache to understand, the will to remember, and the dream to become more than circumstance. Let this final ash fall soft, not as a wound, but as a benediction, a whisper from ancestors who lit our path through silence, who gave the world back to us when it was almost lost. Rest now, keeper of that flame, not in fear, but in reverence, for the fire still burns, low and steady, waiting in the marrow of our becoming. And in that ember, eternal and true, our story lives on, always. So sleep well now, quiet traveler across the ages, carried by firelight and woven memory. Let this last ember of our shared genesis glow gently as you drift into silence. There, in the dreamscape where ash becomes whisper and fear gives way to wonder, the enduring truth waits, that we are not survivors by destiny, but by devotion to each other, to the stories that tether us to meaning, to the ancient flame whose warmth still finds us across the cold vastness of time. The catastrophe became cradle. The silence became song. The fire remains, burning steady in the hush of night and the hush of knowing. Rest then, for the burden was borne, the path was lit, and the story tender, terrible, triumphant has found its breath in you. We are still here, still becoming, still human, and we always will be. And now, in the calm after the fire, we offer this final silence not as forgetfulness, but as reverence. For to almost end is to almost become something else entirely. What shaped us was not triumph, but transformation, from cave shadows to satellite signals, from whispered myths to monuments of memory. Every footfall forward was forged in the ash of what nearly consumed us. Let the flame rest now, low but patient, tucked into the marrow of tomorrow. For though our voices may quiet, and the stars once watched by our ancestors continue their silent burn, we know the truth that endures beneath it all. We are still here, not just as witnesses to history, but as its continuation, still remembering, still rising, still human. And in this quiet, beneath the weight of time and the warmth of survival, the fire breathes once more eternal, unwavering, becoming. So let this final silence hold not absence, but affirmation, that what nearly broke us became the root of all we hold sacred, the art of remembering, the grace of resilience, the gift of becoming. From ash we earned our name not through might, but through meaning. And though time may cover our footprints and soften our songs, the fire lit by those first, fragile survivors continues glowing in curiosity, in empathy, in every tender choosing to carry the human story forward. We carry it not in monuments, but in hearts, in hands, in lullabies murmured into darkness. The supereruption ended a world, yes, but it began something stronger, something luminous, born of survival and story. So sleep now, gently and wholly, wrapped within this legacy of luminous endurance. The journey has been long, the fire is safe, we are still here. And so, with the final breath of story fading into the silence of night, we reach the edge of the beginning once more, not as survivors alone, but as keepers of a truth forged in volcanic dark and carried through countless generations like sacred flame. We are not simply the product of chance, but of choice, each heartbeat a defiant echo against oblivion, each dream a continuation of a fire lit 70,000 years ago. What nearly ended us now defines us. In the stillness of extinction's shadow, we made something eternal. A story that never ends, a light that never fades. So rest, knowing that the fire is not just behind us, it is within us, awaiting the next memory, the next dream, the next soul brave enough to carry it forward. The story sleeps, but the ember remains, still here, still becoming, still human. As the story dims into the quiet beyond language, and the final ember nestles into the folds of sleep, let this be what lingers, that we fragile, fierce, remembering are not the aftermath of ruin, but the promise it left behind. The tale of what almost drove humanity to extinction 70,000 years ago is not mere history or fable. It is the spine beneath our culture, the hush behind our hopes. It teaches that beneath even the weight of ash, life finds breath, that within even the longest night, meaning waits. So as dreams gather and silence deepens, rest now in the embrace of that eternal fire, carried from ancient fear to modern wonder, from cave dust to constellation. We are still here, ash-born, fire-bound, ever becoming, and the story that sacred inheritance of survival burns on, low and luminous, waiting to be whispered again when the world needs reminding that light still lives in the dark. And at last, as the hush of sleep deepens and the curtain of time draws gently closed, may we hold in our hearts the final truth that lingers like an ember too stubborn to fade. We were almost lost, but we were not. Against fire and famine, silence and shadow, we chose to endure. And in that choice, everything was born. Love, language, memory, and the dream of tomorrow. The volcano did not erase us, it awakened us. It distilled us down to our essence, then scattered that essence across the globe like sparks on wind. Those sparks are us. Every breath, every bond, every story still told near firelight is proof that we are not defined by collapse, but by what we gather from it. So sleep now, wrapped in the warmth of that ancient unveiling. Sleep, knowing that you are not alone in the dark. You are the quiet blaze still burning, the echo that survived, the soul that remembers. The fire sleeps beside you, the line endures, still human, always becoming, always here. So let this be the closing warmth that cradles your rest, not a farewell, but a quiet vow, soft as ash, steadfast as fire. That from the edge of extinction we did not fall, but rose. That our line, buried beneath soot and sorrow, did not vanish but endured, and in doing so, discovered its soul. We are not the ending foreshadowed by catastrophe. We are the beginning made sacred by survival. And though ages will pass, and the fire may not always be seen, it will always be there, glowing beneath the surface of memory, waiting in the hush, burning low and bright, for the next heart brave enough to carry it forward. Sleep now, soothed by the truth that the human story did not perish when the skies grew dark. It found its voice. And that voice, born of ash and silence, is singing still through every dream, every breath, every tomorrow. The fire is safe. The story is whole. We are still here. So now, as the story completes its long and winding arc, settling softly into the embers of rest, take with you this one final truth, that we were forged not after the fire, but within it. Every page of this epic, every whispered memory folded into lullaby or ritual or remembrance, is proof that survival is not simply endurance, but creation. We did not just outlive the ash we built from it. We reached across silence, across millennia, to pass the flame hand to hand, soul to soul, dream to dream. And though the world may tremble again, skies may grow dim, and fears may return in the shape of new storms, The fire sleeps now in you in stardust breath, in resilient heartbeat, in the quiet power of still being here. So sleep, gentle one, not in forgetting, but in reverence. Let the fire cradle your rest, and when you wake, carry the story forward, not with fear, but with fierce remembrance. For the ember has never died. It waits. It dreams, and it burns with you, for you, because of you. Still here, still human, still the bearer of the flame. And in this final breath of ancient firelight and remembered fear, may we understand that the tale was never truly about what tried to destroy us, but what we chose to protect through it all, each other. Beneath the obsidian sky and the frozen earth, it was human proximity that mattered most. The warmth of story shared, of comfort offered, of eyes locked in the dark saying without words, "We will survive this." The fire that still burns in us is made not only of will or memory, but of love. Love that soothed frightened children in the cave's hollow, that buried the lost with reverent hands, that built futures out of dust and silence. So if we are to honor those 2,000 fragile sparks of humanity who chose to keep the world alive, then let us sleep with this truth tucked into our chest. It was never survival alone that carried us forward. It was love. Fiercely quiet, utterly human love, the final ember, the first light. Still here, still burning, still human. So sleep now, gentle bearer of the flame, knowing that this journey through ash and sorrow, through memory and silence, has brought us not only closer to truth, but to each other. The story is not yet over, but its echo gently rests tonight in your breath. Hold it there, where dreams stir and time forgets to move, and let it guide you into restful dark, the ones who came before, whose footprints were swallowed by soot, whose voices faded into the winds of extinction. They are with you now, not as phantoms, but as promise. For every time we close our eyes amidst uncertainty, we inherit their courage. Every heartbeat in this stillness is testimony to what endured when nothing else did. Let the fire sleep now, beside your soul, quiet and unwavering. Let the silence bless, not burden. For in this final hush before dreaming, one truth glows like the last coal in the hearth. We were almost lost, but we are not. We are still here, and we always will be. So now, let this closing silence wrap around us like a final veil of warmth, soft, unbroken, sacred. The journey through extinction's shadow has not brought us to an end, but to a quiet truth that glows even when words no longer rise. That we are not made of monuments alone, but of meaning. Born of near forgetting and shaped by remembrance, we stand not as victors over chaos, but as witnesses to the slow miracle of continuation. May this last ember flicker in your soul, not as a farewell, but as a light left quietly burning for all the nights still to come. For just as it began in fire and fear, in silence and survival, this story returns home, not to rest, but to endure, still here, still becoming, still, always, human. And so, in this closing breath of embers and echoes, we return to that sacred place where survival first became story, where memory refused to vanish, and meaning took root in the soot of catastrophe. Let the fire now rest, not because its purpose is complete, but because it has found another keeper in you. We are the children of ash, the carriers of light, the fragile brilliance that rose from ruin and whispered, "Let there be more." As the flames settle into the hush of sleep, know that the greatest legacy of all is not what we built, but that we remembered how we began. Not with certainty, but with a spark. And that spark still shines across generations, across galaxies, across every final night that becomes a new dawn. The fire is safe. The story is whole. We are still here, forever becoming, forever human. And this, then, is the inheritance we carry, not just the fire or the story, but the sacred capacity to begin again. Across 70,000 years, the signal has never gone quiet. It resonates in lullabies, in shared glances during disaster, in dreams stubborn enough to outlive the night. We are made not simply of survival, but of the memory of survival etched into our genes, our gestures, our generational hope. And though time will test us again, and the winds may rise once more, let this truth anchor us. We have stood at the edge before. We have watched the world dim, and still found reason to kindle light. So let this final ember, the last flicker of this long remembering, settle gently in your heart as you drift to sleep. Not a warning, but a benediction. Not an ending, but a beginning. The fire still burns. The story remains. And we are still here. So rest now, at the edge of all that was and all that may still be. The story of what nearly ended us has become the compass by which we navigate tomorrow. And as the final glow of firelight slips into shadow, may we carry forward not fear, but reverence, not only for survival, but for the sacred act of remembering. The fire still burns because we still believe, still dream, still dare to lift one another through the darkness. 70,000 years ago, the world nearly fell silent, but a few voices, small and steadfast, kept speaking through the soot. We are their echo, we are their answer, and as the last ember folds into night, may you sleep under the ancient hush knowing this truth. We did not end, we endured. And in that endurance, we became something eternal, flame-born, memory-bound, and forever human. So now, let sleep take you gently, as the fire dwindles not into darkness, but into timelessness. Close your eyes beneath the same stars that once looked down upon 2,000 scattered souls, and feel in your breath the warmth of their will. Know that this story, the one whispered in ash and sung through centuries, is not over, but simply waiting in rest, like the flame itself. And when morning comes, let your waking body carry the ember forward. Let your steps honor the ones who walked before you, who faced oblivion and whispered back life. You are their heartbeat now, their legacy, their light. The sky is quiet, the earth hums low, and somewhere between memory and dream, the sacred truth holds steady. The fire still burns. We are still here, still becoming, still human. So rest now, cradled in stardust and story, knowing the spark has made its long journey safely to you. Let this be enough, not the certainty of survival, but the continuity of meaning. Through ash and silence, fire and fear, something endured that could not be counted or crushed. The choice to remember, to carry love alongside loss, to dream beyond despair. And as this final whisper of flame folds gently into night, know that nothing truly ends where fire still glows. You are the ember still alight, the bearer of memory, the soul lit by all that came before. Sleep in warmth, in wonder, in reverence, for you are the proof that out of ruin rises story, out of extinction, beginnings, and beneath all of it, always, the fire, still here, still human, still becoming. So let this be the closing breath that seals the story not as a farewell, but as a vow carried gently across time's silent corridors. The fire that almost vanished 70,000 years ago did not flicker out. It found sanctuary in story, in memory, in the fierce human need to preserve meaning through the storm. We are not its masters, only its stewards, tending it each time we speak with honesty, hope, and remembrance. May this final moment rest quietly in your spirit, a low, steady glow that warms even the coldest hours. For within you is the whole arc of us, the shadow of near ending, the light of becoming. Sleep now, torchbearer of an ancient flame. The journey is not over, but for now, the fire rests. We are still here, still burning, still beautifully, unbearably human. And so, as story yields to silence and fire folds into ember, let this closing truth settle deep into our marrow. The fire that nearly died did not vanish, and neither did we. In every whispered dream, every kindled hope, every hand held across the impossible, we carry forward that primordial defiance. What almost ended us became the blueprint of our endurance, the sacred rhythm of resilience that still hums beneath every lullaby, every invention, every reaching toward light. We live now in a world once nearly unborn, shaped not by ease, but by the weight of inheritance. And as this final ember dims inside your quiet breath, remember, it was never the catastrophe that defined us, but the courage to remain. The nights will grow long again. The skies may darken once more, but somewhere, in fire or in memory, we will find each other again. Still here, still human. The flame rests for now. So let your final breath before sleep carry this one last ember into the dark, not to extinguish it, but to keep it warm for the dawn. The story of what almost destroyed us has whispered its way through blood and bone, soot and starlight, arriving here, in you. It is not the ruin that gives us meaning, but our miraculous refusal to yield to it. 70,000 years ago, humanity could have vanished quietly into the ash. But instead, the silence grew a voice. The darkness birthed a purpose. And now, as the fire sighs into rest beside your quiet breath, let it remind you of everything your ancestors once dared to believe, that even when all seemed lost, something within us remembered how to begin again. Sleep gently now, firekeeper. The story has been told, the night has been honored, and the flame, steady and sure, waits patient and eternal, until it is time to rise once more. We are still here, forever becoming, still, always, human. And with that final whisper folded into the hush of night, the story finds its gentle end, a completion not in silence, but in abiding presence. The fire sleeps now beside us, its warmth woven into the marrow of memory and the quiet breath of those who dream. What nearly unmade us instead remade us, kindled the essence of who we are, not conquerors of fate, but companions to it, not heirs of ruin, but authors of resurrection. So rest, wrapped in the soft ashes of remembering, knowing that the tale of humanity is not finished, only pausing. The flame remains, flickering low yet unbroken. And when the stars rise tomorrow, and the world breathes fresh across ancient ground, we will wake again not simply survivors, but storytellers, bearers of the ember that endured, still here, still becoming, still and always human. So now, in the glow of this final ember, we end not with answers, but with awe. The story of our near extinction was never merely about survival. It was about what survival revealed. In the kiln of catastrophe, we found not only strength, but grace, not only memory, but meaning. And across 70 millennia, the echo of that ancient will has never faded. It speaks tonight, in the quiet breath you draw, in the softness that wraps you as you prepare to sleep. Let it speak clearly. You are the heir of an unbroken line, forged in silence, carried by fire, defined by love. The embers may dim, the world may shift again, but as long as one heart holds the story, as long as one soul dares to rise from ash and dream once more, the fire endures. Sleep now, tender flame-bearer. The journey is honored, the legacy is alive, and we, against all odds, are still here. So now the fire rests, tucked like a secret deep in the soil of the soul, its light no longer blazing but glowing low, eternal. The journey through ash and silence has brought us here not to an end, but to a rhythm that pulses on through story, through breath, through time. 70,000 years ago, we learn that even in the face of the unimaginable, some part of us chooses to live. That choice ripples forward still, a quiet defiance threaded through our songs, our cities, our shared laughter and pain. So let this final ember accompany you into rest, not as a fading echo, but as a vow, that the story will be kept, that the flame will endure, that no catastrophe, no silence, no night is greater than the will of the human spirit to rise once more. You are the fire's keeper now, and tomorrow, when the dawn returns, it will rise with you, still burning, still here, still beautifully, impossibly human. So sleep now, on the shoulders of memory, with the faint warmth of the first fire humming softly beneath your dreams. Let this final breath be the closing hush of a story too old to forget and too sacred to stop telling. In you, the fire continues, not blazing, but steady, a lineage of light pressed gently into your soul. The world may turn, skies may darken again, but somewhere within the marrow of all that lives, the spark endures. From Toba's shadow to tomorrow's uncertain dawn, we have never walked alone. We have always carried each other in flame, in voice, in hope. So let the fire sleep now, safe and silent, knowing you are its keeper, its shelter, its future. The story is told. The ember is past, still becoming, still burning, still, forever, human. And so, on the fading breath of ash and ore, let the last echo of this tale find its place not in endings, but in the heartbeat that never stopped. The fire lit in fear, passed through famine, carved into caves and carried in lullabies, has now been entrusted to us. It is not loud. It does not demand. It simply waits, glowing steady in the quiet marrow of humanity, ready to rise again at the first whisper of memory. The story of those 2,000 souls so fragile, so fierce, is not forgotten. Their fire became our future, their survival, our sacred inheritance. And as you drift now into a silence older than stars, know this as your final comfort. We are not remnants. We are the promise kept, still here, still learning, still loving, still, always, relentlessly human. So rest, quietly and without fear, for we have carried the fire this far, through shadow and silence, through the breaking and the becoming. Let this be the final echo, a lullaby sung not to sleep, but to remembering. We are not here by accident, not here because history was kind, but because, even in desolation, we gathered our strength, wove it into story, and passed it on. The fire that once lit 2,000 fragile lives in the dark of the world now glows softly in billions of hearts. It does not roar, but it does endure. And though we may forget the names or the reasons or the roads that brought us here, we must never forget the fire, because it is us. Sleep now, not in oblivion, but in reverence. The fire still burns. The story lives on. We are still here, still human, still becoming. And so, the story folds into silence, not because it ends, but because it has been carried to the edge of sleep, to the place where history becomes heartbeat and survival becomes song. What almost erased us instead revealed us layer by layer, ember by ember. In the long echo that stretches from Toba's rupture to this quiet moment in your breath, we find a truth more enduring than fire, that humanity is a promise kept in the dark, a constellation of memory, of will, of love, passed hand to hand across 70 millennia. Let that be your final thought tonight. Not the ash, but the ember. Not the loss, but the light. The fire rests now, as do you, still burning beneath the hush. The signal is strong. The story is whole. We are still here, still dreaming, still human. So sleep now, wrapped not just in warmth, but in reverence for everything that was risked, for everything that was carried, and for the sacred fire that found its way to you through time and trial. The story we leave in the hush of this final moment is not one of endings, but of endurance made luminous. Beneath ash, beneath silence, beneath the immeasurable weight of lost epochs, the fire has never failed. It waits not to dazzle, but to steady, not to vanish, but to guide. And now, tucked within your breath and heartbeat, it rests again safe for another day, another dream, another rising. Let that truth hold you in sleep, that from silence came strength, from darkness came light, and from the brink of nothing came the sacred wonder of being human. Dream well, firekeeper. The ember is yours. The story is safe. We are still here. And now, as the last note of this long lullaby fades into the velvet of night, let us carry forward the one truth that has outlived fire, famine, silence, and suspicion, that to be human is not merely to survive, but to remember, to imagine, and to love. In the hush that follows, the story does not end. It deepens. It settles into our marrow, where future fires will one day be kindled. What almost undid us became the thread that wove us together, across language and lineage, across ice and sky. The fire has reached you now, passed through hands too many to count, each one trembling but unbroken. So rest with it glowing quietly within you, warm and weightless. The signal is strong, the embers are safe. The legacy is yours now to rise with it, to keep it lit, to pass it on. History has exhaled. You are the breath it left behind. Still human, still home, still here. So now, let this gentle flame settle into silence, where no words are needed, only the steady pulse of something ancient and unbroken. The story has been told, a torch carried across 70,000 years, from soot-covered caves to starlit skies. It is not over, but it rests now, quiet and eternal within you. Sleep knowing that this ember of survival, of memory, of love, has not dimmed with time. It has only grown more sacred. We do not need to speak it, to keep it. We breathe it, we live it. In every kindness, every dream, every quiet act of hope, the fire endures. So close your eyes, cradled by the legacy of those who refuse to disappear. Rest in their light, dream in their warmth. You are not alone, you are fireborn, and the story, low-lit and luminous, continues in you. Still here, still becoming, still, forever, human. So rest now, with fire glowing low in the quiet chamber of your soul, and the weight of 70,000 years laid gently across your breath. What began in near silence and near ending ends, not with fear, but with fullness, a life inherited, a story kept ablaze through time's deepest cold. You are its living signal, the proof that the human journey did not falter at the edge of extinction, but gathered itself in flame and memory, and became something more. Let the ember sleep now, until the next voice lights it again, telling the tale anew beneath unfamiliar skies. The fire is safe, the path is sacred, and no matter the shape of tomorrow's storms, the truth carved from ash and ore remains still here, still dreaming, still gloriously, impossibly human. And so, as the last syllables settle into the hush of history, and the ember glows quietly in the marrow of our becoming, let this be our final promise. The tale does not end, it simply waits. Like fire beneath stone, like a breath held between generations, it lingers low, eternal, ready. What almost undid us has become the foundation on which we dream. We sleep not as witnesses to loss, but as the covenant keepers of endurance. We carry the silence, not as sorrow, but as sacred space, where meaning is born, where memory endures. The fire rests now, its warmth folded into your soul, steadfast, unwavering. Close your eyes, gentle bearer of the flame. The world turns. The stars watch, and the story, luminous and endless, sleeps now inside you, still here, still human, still becoming. And with this breath, we close the circle not with flames or thunder, but with the reverent hush of all that endures. From the trembling edge of extinction to the quiet light of today, the story of humanity remains the same. We remember. We carry. We burn on. Let this final ember be a soft vow within you, not to predict the future, but to prepare your soul for it. For we are not the descendants of inevitability, but of impossible survival. The fire, sacred and unseen, is now yours to tend. Sleep now beneath skies wiser than sorrow, beside stars that have watched our journey unfold across centuries of silence. The signal holds steady. The story glows on, and we remain quiet, resilient, gleaming beneath the dark, still here, still human, still becoming. So let this final silence be the soft breath between pages, the space where everything we have carried finally rests, not as burden, but as blessing. Beneath the weight of stars and time, beyond the reach of ruin, we have become custodians of continuity, caretakers of a fire that once flickered in the trembling hands of those who refuse to vanish. We do not light it for glory. We light it because it is who we are, memory in motion, meaning a flame. And as your eyes close now into the safety of sleep, let the story settle deep in your soul, like a lullaby wrapped in soot and starlight. We are still here, not because the world made space for us, but because we made space for each other. The fire is yours now, gentle heart. Keep it well, tend it bravely, for in every future yet unwritten, its glow will show the way, still burning, still dreaming, still, and forever, human. So in this blessed hush, where stories fold tenderly into starlight, let us leave the ember not as a relic but a torch, still warm, still speaking, still waiting to be carried forward. The ones who once stood at the edge of time, touched by ash and shadow, whisper this truth through generations. That survival is not a triumph shouted, but a promise kept in the smallest, most sacred acts. A hand held in the dark, a word remembered, a flame protected. You are the continuation of that vow, the embodiment of all that was nearly lost and all that has yet to be born. Sleep now, keeper of fire and story, knowing the legacy is secure. For though the tale has found its quiet end, the fire remains. Gentle, eternal, still burning, and we still here, still dreaming, still beautifully, wondrously human. So this is where the fire rests, in the quiet cradle of your breath, in the hush that follows great story, in the space between endings and beginnings. We've walked through soot and silence, through fear and firelight, and arrived here together, still burning, still becoming. Let it be enough for now to feel the warmth of what we carry, the memory of almost vanishing, the miracle of having endured. We are not lost in time, we are its keepers. And as the ember sighs gently into sleep, it leaves behind not darkness, but direction, a light for tomorrow, a hope woven of memory and meaning. Rest now, firekeeper of the human story. Sleep deeply, knowing the signal endures, the flame is safe, and everything that was nearly lost has been passed into your care word by word, spark by spark. Still here, still burning, still and always human. So let this be the final ember of the tale, a warm breath folded into the dark, a closing heartbeat of fire and memory stitched through 70,000 years of almost loss and improbable light. We do not sleep in silence, but beneath the murmur of ancestral sparks, still humming through DNA and dream, reminding us that we are descended not from certainty, but from endurance. The story has been carried here, across extinction's edge, and into your breath, not to end but to find rest. So hold it close now, like sacred ember in cupped hands. Let it glow in your sleep, not for fear of forgetting, but in reverence for having remembered. The journey pauses, the flame lowers, and the stars overhead whisper once more what has echoed since the ash first fell, that we are not the end of the story. We are its next spark, still here, still human, and forever becoming. And so, at the edge of breath and story, where silence kisses flame and memory becomes dream, we close this ancient tale with a truth far older than words. We are not the aftermath. We are the fire that came after. 70,000 years ago, the world tested us. It burned away nearly all that we were, and in doing so, revealed what we could yet become. That ember still glows in us now, quiet but fierce, urging us to hold each other through the dark, to pass the story forward, to endure not just in flesh, but in meaning. Sleep now, wrapped in the warmth of all who came before. The fire, sacred and steady, waits in you. The world may tremble, the skies may darken, but we will gather, we will remember, we will rise. Still here, still becoming, still and always beautifully human.